My wife of 8 years cheated on me with this manipulating therapist. Worse, he is her uncle. I'm David, 34M, Sarah's 27F husband. We've been married for 8 years now, and she truly means the world to me. We've shared a beautiful, dreamlike love story, blessed with 2 amazing children. Our oldest, Emily, is 7 this year. She's incredibly smart and affectionate, always clinging to her dad. And then there's our little boy, Leo, who's 5. He's just adorable and so full of energy you can't even describe it. As a father and a husband, I've always tried my best, working hard to ensure my wife and children have a comfortable and prosperous life. I thought I was doing everything right, believing I had the perfect family. But then things started to go a little off track. About a year ago, Sarah and I began to experience some minor issues, mainly concerning communication. You know how life is. Sometimes work just sweeps you away. I admit there were times when I was too busy and neglected Sarah a lot. She even mentioned feeling a bit lonely and distant. I know that's true, and I'm always trying to make it up to her. Not wanting small issues to escalate, I proactively suggested to Sarah that we try marriage counseling. I believe that with a professional's help, things would improve for both of us. Sarah agreed, so we sought out Danny, a well-known and reportedly very skilled therapist. Danny wasn't a stranger either. He's actually Sarah's cousin once removed. I'd already met Danny a few times at family gatherings and genuinely liked him. He seemed like a trustworthy, warm, and attentive man. It was clear he was a professional. I trusted Danny not only because he was a licensed expert, but also because he was Sarah's relative, a part of our family. Both of us placed our absolute trust in him. To be honest, the first few therapy sessions were incredibly effective. We started communicating better, and I felt as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. He said things that were so true and logical, filling me with hope. Little did I know, that was the beginning of my worst nightmare. Everything started to go wrong in ways I couldn't have imagined. Then came that fateful night. 3 nights prior, Sarah told me she had an urgent matter with her sister. It sounded normal enough, but the way she acted was anything but. It was already past 9:30 p.m., and she was still rushing to shower, spraying on heavy perfume, and meticulously putting on makeup. How could I not find that strange? Was she meeting her sister or going on a date? At that point, I was already deeply suspicious, a churning unease in my gut. But that was just the beginning. The most outrageous thing was this. Our son Leo had a high fever that day, almost delirious. I'd seen him struggling all day, and Sarah knew it too. But instead of staying home to care for him, she said, "He just has a slight fever. He'll be fine." I heard Leo's severe cough and labored breathing, his body burning hot, as Sarah slammed the door shut, leaving us behind. My heart tightened. I looked at Sarah, then at Leo, then watched her leave without a hint of hesitation. In that moment, I just wanted to scream at her to stay home, but I didn't. I knew I had to stay calm and strong for my children. I called my boss immediately, telling them I'd be taking tomorrow off to care for Leo. I was the only one my children could count on. I needed to protect them, but I also needed to know exactly what was going on. About half an hour after Sarah left, I picked up my phone again, my hands trembling as I opened her iPhone tracking app. My heart pounded in my chest. And there it was. The location that appeared on the screen was exactly where my gut had told me it would be: Danny's office. In that moment, I felt a heavy stone weighing on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I continued to wait and care for Leo, with every minute dragging on like an eternity. About 3 hours later, well past midnight, Sarah finally came home. She walked in, still reeking of strong perfume. I tried to stay calm and asked her, "How's Jenny, honey? What was so urgent?" Sarah stammered, giving a vague answer. Jenny, Jenny, always with the silly drama." I looked at her coldly. "What about Leo? I've been taking care of him, but he still has a high fever." Sarah flinched, blinked, then quickly said, "Oh, he's fine. It's probably just a slight fever. Nothing serious." After saying that, she didn't even bother to check on our son before rushing into the bathroom. My feigned calm shattered. I knew I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I went straight to my study and got out my laptop. I rummaged around and found a second Facebook account of Sarah's, one she never used, in front of me. I used the forgot password option through a secondary email address I'd accidentally discovered. My hands shook uncontrollably as the messages began to appear on the screen. And then it hit me. A series of filthy, disgustingly detailed messages between Sarah and an account with a fake name. But I knew. I absolutely knew who it was, because interspersed among their conversations about all sorts of sick sexual acts and revolting intimate dates were messages where they mocked me about private secrets I had trusted and shared during our earlier sessions. If not Danny, then who else could it be? The thought of my wife secretly having a relationship with her own cousin once removed, who was also the therapist supposedly helping us, made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe I had ever kissed her mouth. It turns out I wasn't a bad husband. I was just a fool, deceived and manipulated in the most vile way by two disturbed individuals. There had been so many signs, yet I had ignored them, thinking that something so utterly disgusting could never happen in real life. Just about 3 months after we started therapy, Sarah began saying she wanted to have private sessions with Danny. She called them self-care sessions, meant to address deeper personal issues. And then, after Sarah started those private sessions, everything in our joint therapy sessions began to change drastically. Instead of being a place for us to reconcile and be open, I felt like I was in a courtroom, and I was the defendant. I had the distinct impression that Danny and Sarah were openly ganging up on me. Sounds crazy, right? But Danny really started using personal information, my deepest fears, things I had only dared to confide in that therapy room, to attack me. He'd say things like, "See, David, it's your fear of failure that makes you throw yourself into work and makes Sarah feel lonely. I think Sarah deserves a stronger man, someone who can handle everything without fear. You should try to find more balance." And Sarah? She'd just agree, nodding vigorously and blame me. "That's right, you've always been like that. I'm tired of your insecurities." After those sessions, I felt even more confused and hurt, but through Danny's words, I was simply too sensitive and unwilling to confront my own problems. At the time, I couldn't even comprehend what was happening. I just thought maybe I really do have issues, and these two, a professional and my wife, were trying to help me realize it. Little did I know, it was all just a filthy charade. Things continued this way, and the red flags started appearing more frequently and clearly. Sarah, at some point, had inexplicably switched from calling him Uncle Ramirez to just Danny, or the way she would proudly boast about Danny to everyone, a way she had never spoken about me. It wasn't just Sarah. My daughter Emily also started frequently mentioning Uncle Danny coming to visit with Mommy and her when Daddy was at work. He'd even buy them lots of toys and take them out. In fact, when I asked Sarah why Danny was visiting so often, Emily, who was playing nearby, blurted out, "Daddy's making Mommy sad, so Mommy has to find Uncle Danny to be happier. Uncle Danny understands Mommy more than Daddy." At the time, though I was utterly shocked and uncomfortable, I didn't dare to think things had gone so far. Now looking back, I'm horrified to realize that they had bribed Emily with toys and secret outings to keep her quiet. All the tiny pieces in my head formed a terrifying picture I didn't want to believe. They dared to manipulate my daughter. I hate myself for not realizing it sooner. That entire night, I couldn't sleep a wink. Lying next to Leo, just hearing him breathe was enough to make my heart ache. My mind reeled with all these filthy truths. My heart was torn. One part of me wanted to drag Sarah out of bed immediately, scream at her, and make her pay. But the other half, the more rational part, looked at Leo sleeping soundly in his bed, still coughing occasionally. I couldn't let my anger hurt my children. They were innocent. I had to stay calm. I had to act rationally. I had to protect these two little ones. Just a few messages weren't enough to expose them. The next morning, as the weak sunlight filtered through the window, I was sitting in the living room. Emily, my 7-year-old daughter, walked past. She saw me sitting there, dazed, my eyes swollen. She stopped and looked at me with her clear, innocent gaze, then asked in a naive voice, "Daddy, are you sad?" I nodded, trying to force a distorted smile. Then Emily said something, a sentence I swear I'll never forget for the rest of my life. It was like a punch straight to my heart, cutting through all the pain that came before it. She said, "Daddy, you should find Uncle Danny to be your boyfriend so you can be happier too. Mommy says ever since Uncle Danny became her boyfriend, he's taught her how to be much happier and more joyful." My entire world utterly collapsed. Everything before my eyes blurred. Not only had my wife betrayed me, not only had that therapist manipulated me, but even more painfully, my own daughter, my precious little girl, had been fed those poisonous ideas. Sarah wasn't just having an affair, she had turned our child into a tool, a pawn in her filthy game. I hugged Emily tightly, tears streaming down my face. The pain in me was immense. I realized that not only had I been deceived, but my 2 children had also been dragged into this quagmire. I knew from that moment on, my life would never be the same again. After all that pain, I knew I couldn't hesitate for another second. I had to act immediately, and I did something I never thought I'd have to do in my life. I hired a private investigator. I told him everything that had happened, all the suspicious signs. I told him, I need the truth no matter how painful it is, and I need evidence to protect my children. Afterwards, I had to try to act normal around my kids and Sarah so as not to give anything away. After a week of agony, an email arrived. It was the PI's preliminary report. My heart pounded as I opened the attachment, and there it was, the photos. Sarah and Danny leave his office together, dating and holding hands like teenagers. They looked sickeningly intimate, laughing as if nothing was wrong. Needless to say, my guts felt twisted into knots. All my suspicions were confirmed. I took a deep breath, gripping my phone tightly. It was time for me to confront Sarah. It was time to bring down the curtain on this ridiculous charade. One morning, after Sarah and Danny's usual uncle and niece date night, I decided it was time. I contacted the PI, asking him to park near the house, ready to record or photograph Sarah's reaction when I confronted her. I had planned everything meticulously. I wanted all the evidence documented, leaving her no room to deny anything. When Sarah woke up, I called her to the living room. I was calm and cold, no yelling or making a scene. Sarah looked at me, a bit confused. The room was eerily silent. I took a deep breath and began. I looked straight into Sarah's eyes and said, my voice icy, each word like a freeze frame, "Sarah, where were you last night?" She looked at me, her face still groggy, and replied as if completely oblivious, "What are you talking about, David? Are you crazy? Are you imagining things?" She even gave a dismissive chuckle as if I were a lunatic. "I told you I was visiting Sam." I said nothing, just stared at her for a long moment. Noticing my unusual demeanor, the smile on her face slowly faded. Then she started blaming me. "What are you overthinking now? You're always like this. You always neglect me. Yes, I went to find Danny for understanding. You're the reason for it." I couldn't take it anymore. "Danny?" I scoffed. "Our expert therapist uncle? The one you conspired with to manipulate and deceive me?" Upon hearing me, she suddenly burst into laughter, a contemptuous, brazen, and utterly disgusting laugh. "What do you think therapy is, David?" she said, her voice full of mockery. "Only Danny understands me. He's the one who truly knows what I need, unlike you." Blood rushed to my head. I held up the stack of documents and threw them onto the table. There were the filthy messages, the date plans, and the sick words. In addition, there were the photos the PI had sent, pictures of them out together, dining and going to hotels, even photos of her and Danny leaving his office last night. "Therapy, like going to hotels together?" I asked, my voice sharp. Sarah's face went from a scornful smile and brazen expression to one of utter shock. Her eyes were fixated on the irrefutable evidence. No more lies could cover it up. I looked at her, devoid of any emotion. "Do you have anything to say now, Sarah?" She hung her head, her shoulders trembling. Then, in a tiny, almost inaudible voice, she confessed, I've been having an affair with Danny for 3 months. He's the first person I could truly connect with." Hearing that confession, I felt no surprise anymore, only an overwhelming disgust. And I had once loved this woman. I stood there, looking at Sarah. She had just confessed to having an affair with Danny, that wretched cousin-cum-therapist of ours. Her confession felt like the final knife thrust into my heart. Then she lifted her head, her eyes holding something wild and deranged. "Avid," she said, her voice almost a whisper, but each word was like a bullet fired into my brain. "You could never understand the love Danny and I share. He is the light of my life. We have a deeper connection than therapy. He's my twin flame, my destiny." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Destiny. She confessed to betraying me and abandoning our sick children for something she called destiny. "You and the children cannot stay in the same house with me anymore, Sarah." My voice was icy, devoid of any emotion. "Not for another minute." I immediately went into the children's room. Leo was still fast asleep, with an occasional soft cough. I picked him up. He squinted, his eyes open, then snuggled back into my arms. Emily was a bit more awake. I wasn't sure if she had heard what we said. "Emily, Leo, let's go," I said, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Emily looked at me, her big round eyes still showing fear and confusion. "Go where, Daddy? Where's Mommy? Isn't Mommy coming with us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Mommy needs to sort some things out. For now, Emily, be a good girl and go with Daddy." My heart ached, but I said nothing more. I held Leo tight, took Emily's hand, and the three of us walked out of that house. The house I once thought was my happy home was now just an empty shell. I had already arranged for us to stay at my parents' house. Although they would be shocked, I knew they would always be there for me and the kids. Since we left, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. Sarah has been calling and texting constantly. Sometimes she apologizes, sometimes she begs me to come back, saying she made a mistake, that she'll change, but I haven't replied. Not a single text, not a single call, nothing. I can't trust her anymore. It's all just another manipulation. I just want to escape this nightmare as soon as possible and protect my children from anything related to Sarah and that wretched Danny. This was just the beginning of the fight. I couldn't let Sarah and Danny get away with this easily. I wanted them to pay. The very next morning, after settling my children at my parents' house, I started taking action. I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. I needed professional help. I immediately contacted 2 lawyers, one specializing in divorce and another specializing in abuse cases, where doctors, or in this case therapists, exploit their patients. I sat down with them and recounted the entire story from beginning to end. As I told it, I kept thinking they'd doubt me, that they'd think I was crazy. I wished I was crazy. But no, the lawyers' faces grew stern, becoming increasingly serious. They looked at me with eyes full of understanding, not a hint of judgment. The lawyer specializing in abuse cases said something I'll never forget. "David, this isn't just an ordinary affair. This is a severe breach of trust and ethical violation, and we're going to make him pay dearly." Hearing that, a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. With lawyers by my side, I felt empowered. The game had begun. Our first action was to target Danny. This guy wasn't just an ordinary deceiver. He was a professional, and he had abused his position to destroy someone else's life. Immediately, the lawyer helped me draft a formal complaint and sent it directly to the Board of Psychological Licensing. This was an extremely crucial step because if Danny's license was revoked, his career would be over. He would never be allowed to practice this healing profession again. Just think, a person who exploits a patient's trust to have an affair with their wife and then psychologically manipulates them. If someone like that were still allowed to practice, society would fall into chaos, wouldn't it? So, I started posting my story on social media. I chose large forums about therapy and psychology, and even some local news sites. Of course, I initially kept my children's names private to protect them. I shared all the evidence I had. I also emphasized that Danny wasn't a stranger. He was Sarah's cousin once removed, and someone I had trusted like a friend. I wanted everyone to know that the person who destroyed my family wasn't some stranger. He was someone Sarah and I had trusted implicitly, someone we had placed all our hopes in. This made my story even more bitter, and I knew it would resonate with many people. But I wanted Danny to pay a price he would never forget. This was just the beginning. I never imagined that my decision to go public would create such an intense effect. My story went viral immediately. It was being shared everywhere. The comments were overflowing with outrage. Thousands of people expressed their empathy and anger. But the biggest twist was that a wave of Danny's other victims started speaking out. Do you understand? Not just one, but many. They began contacting me, sending messages and emails, telling their own stories. Inappropriate suggestions, hints that crossed the patient-professional boundaries, or even financial abuse of some patients. He didn't just destroy my family, he was a sick predator, a monster who drained others of their trust. My lawyers were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of evidence and testimonies. With all the mounting evidence and a flood of testimonies from other victims, karma started knocking on Danny's door. My lawyers didn't waste a second. They immediately submitted everything to the Board of Psychological Licensing. You know, I still remember the day I received the email notification from the board. The content was very brief, but it filled me with immense joy. It stated that Danny had been immediately investigated and his license was suspended indefinitely. After news of the investigation and his suspension spread, Danny's career completely collapsed. His reputation, something he had built by deceiving others, now vanished like a soap bubble. His luxurious office, where I had sat, foolishly believing every lie, was now forced to close its doors. Danny had begun to pay. But what about Sarah, the woman I had shared a bed with for 8 years? The person I once thought was the love of my life. She also had to be held accountable for what she had done. The divorce process with Sarah was a full-blown war. Sarah still tried to resist, fighting for assets as if she were the victim, but I wasn't going to give up easily. With all the evidence I had, my lawyer helped me fight so that Sarah would bear a significantly larger financial burden. I drained all funds from our joint accounts and froze all credit cards. She wouldn't be able to casually spend my money anymore. The PI fees, legal costs, everything would be calculated into her share. I wanted her to feel the cost of her betrayal. But that wasn't the biggest karma she faced. The most painful thing for her, and what I was determined to win at all costs, was full custody of our children. You see, to me, my children are everything. Sarah abandoning a delirious Leno to meet her lover, her manipulating Emily, filling her head with malicious words, and even their messages mocking me, all of it was presented by my lawyer in court. I fought with all my might, and in the end, I gained full custody of my children. The feeling was both relief and pain. Sarah lost everything. She was only granted limited visitation rights, always under strict supervision. I didn't want her to have any opportunity to continue hurting Emily and Leno. This was the price she had to pay for daring to mess with my children. Do you think Sarah has suffered enough? Not yet. Karma continued its course, striking at the very thing she sacrificed everything for, that wretched Danny. When Danny began to face legal consequences, when his career was ruined, when everything came crashing down on him, he didn't care one bit about his twin flame. He completely cut off contact with Sarah. Not a single text, not a single call. He was even more brazen. During family interrogations on Sarah's side, he blamed her entirely. He claimed that Sarah had seduced him, had forced him to do those things. You see, that's his nature. Utterly cowardly and selfish. Sarah, she had sacrificed everything, her family, her children, even her dignity, just to chase after that man. And now, she had to face the brutal truth that she had lost everything for someone who was just as vile, selfish, and dirty as she was. It truly was a taste of her own medicine. Not only did Danny turn his back on her, but Sarah's entire world also crumbled. Her family, including her parents, and even Danny's own family turned their backs on her. When everyone learned the full truth, they couldn't accept it. Our mutual friends completely ostracized her. Sarah became utterly alone. No one stood by her side anymore. Afterward, I heard that Sarah fell into a severe mental breakdown. She tried to contact me again, sending a barrage of messages and calls, begging for my forgiveness, saying she deeply regretted it. But I was completely cold. I didn't care. I no longer had any affection or pity for her. It was too late. The price of betrayal, Sarah had to bear it herself. Everything with Sarah and Danny had ended, but for me and my children, things were just beginning. I know this scar will remain, but I have to live on. to be strong for my two little angels. The thing that troubled me most after all that chaos was Emily. She was only 7 years old, yet she had to witness and be drawn into this mess. Emily was innocent. She too was a victim, manipulated by her own mother and that wretched Danny. I knew we had to heal. I dedicated all my free time to Emily and Leo. We played together, read books, and I told her stories about love and trust. Gradually, Emily began to understand everything. She no longer mentioned Uncle Danny. Our father-daughter bond grew stronger day by day. In fact, later, when Sarah wanted to see the children, Emily firmly refused to see her mother, or if she did, it had to be with me present and under strict supervision. I understood how she felt. As for me, this recovery journey hasn't been easy, my friends, but slowly, I've felt better. The wound is still there, a deep scar, but at least it's no longer bleeding. I focused all my energy on caring for my children and rebuilding our lives. My children are my biggest motivation. I want them to grow up in peace, in true love, free from lies and manipulation. If there's one piece of advice I want to send to you, those watching this video, it's this. Trust your instincts. Never doubt yourself when you see red flags. If you feel something is wrong, investigate it thoroughly. And most importantly, protect the ones you love at all costs. They are all we have. Thank you for listening to today's story from the Guilty Notes channel. If this story resonated with you, please like, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional real-life stories and valuable lessons. See you in the next video.